Hey everyone, in this series of videos, we're going to learn about the dependent samples t-test. Now, if you recall from earlier in the semester, we already encountered the t-test, and that was the independent samples t-test. So to recap, the t-test is used for comparing means between groups. So when we compared the means between groups earlier this semester, they were independent groups, so they were not related. This time around, we're going to look at two different types of dependent samples t-tests. So they would have some kind of relationship. They wouldn't be independent. And then if you recall, because we're working with means, they have to be numerical. So it has to be an interval or ratio type of variable. Okay, now this might get a little confusing, and so please pay attention. And of course, you could always rewind, right? Or just play back the video. So here we go. As I mentioned, we have two different types of dependent samples t-tests. In the first situation, we call it would be for a within group comparison kind of research question. And in this case, it's not really that we're dealing with two different groups. What we actually have would be two variables within one group. So as I put on here, the means of two variables measured within one sample. In this situation, the test is sometimes called a repeated measures t-test. And we'll get into the examples later on in a second. First, let me get to the other example of a dependent samples t-test. And this one would be for group differences type of research questions. It's also known as a paired samples t-test. And in this case, the means of two related samples are compared from two different groups that have some kind of relationship. And again, we'll talk about examples in a second. First, let's go back to the repeated measures t-test. A few examples right here. In this first example, customers are asked to rate two package designs. So maybe there's package A, let's call it that, and then there's package B. The brand manager wants to know which design, A or B, will receive a higher rating. So if you think about this, right, we got the same group of customers, but we're going to end up with two different variables, what they think about package A and then what they think about package B. So that's an example of a within group comparison, a repeated measures t-test situation. And then in the next example, an HR manager wants to know whether a training video increases employees' knowledge of safety procedures. Knowledge is tested before and after viewing the training video. So we look at their score on a test, for example, before the training video and then after. So same group of people, same employee, but two different test scores. So that's what we mean by two variables within one sample. And then the final example, which we'll focus later on in the next video, will be this. A coffee shop wants to know whether young professionals purchase lattes or cappuccino more often. Okay, now let's move on to comparing means of two related samples or paired samples. In this first example, you're testing effects of a store layout change in your chain of bagel shops. You choose 18 cities for the test and choose two similar stores in each city. So there's one pair of stores for each city. One store in each pair keeps the old store layout. We'll call that the control group. And then the other store in each pair gets a new layout. Sales are tracked over a 3-month period cells in the control group are compared with cells in the match layout change group. So now we have two different groups and we're trying to compare their means, in this case, cells. And there's some kind of relationship here because, right, recall that in each city, there are going to be two different stores, and that's their relationship right there. Next example, you're examining which of two types of performance review is more effective in improving sales rep performance. You identify 82 pairs of sales reps with identical backgrounds. One member of each pair gets performance review type A. The other member of the pair gets performance review type B. The dependent variable is percent of quota achieved in the following quarter. So in this case, we have paired up two different sales reps with identical backgrounds. So this could be, let's say they have the same age, gender, and educational background, and they get paired up. And then they get two different, one gets performance review type A, the other one performance review type B. And then they compare their percent of quota. So in this case, the relationship is that they are paired together with their identical backgrounds. And then in this next example, here's a common example that people give when they try to explain paired samples kind of t-test. So in this case, a medical team studies identical twins to assess the impact of salt consumption on the risk of developing high blood pressure. So in this case, their relationship is that they are twins. So maybe one will be asked to consume more salt and then the other one not as much. And then they'll compare their blood pressure. And another example that's not listed here would be, say, if we were studying husband and wife based on something, maybe purchasing behavior. And in this case, their relationship is that they live in the same house together or that they're married. So the point is that there are two groups that are related somehow. All right, so that should give you an overview of the two different types of t-tests. In the next video, let's look into this coffee shop example.